Catching diamonds. It's the primary goal of so many here in Call of the Wild theAngler, and yet it can seem like it's all entirely luck-based. Oh my god! Having felt that way myself for so long, I wanted to make a guide detailing my basic approach to landing diamonds so that if you're struggling like I did for over a year, you too can get the most out of your angling adventures. Now, many of you watching this probably already do this, and if you have anything to add or any other methods, definitely leave them in the comments below. This game is pretty nuanced, and more insight is good to help everybody out. I'll also say this is less a specific guide to catching any one diamond, and more a generalized approach for catching all species of diamonds, as I found for me, it was counterintuitive to how I most often fish in real life. So, the basic concept is this. Pick a species that you want to catch a diamond of. In this case, we're going after cutthroat trout. There are a number of locations on the map that tend to produce diamonds for any given species, and I would highly recommend joining the official theAngler Discord, which I'll link in the description below, and using their help sheets. Each map has one, they provide a ton of information, but we're primarily using two main pieces here. The first one is the lure hook size chart. This probably isn't what you're expecting. You see here for cutthroat trout that the number 2 size hook is listed for diamonds. We will not be using a size 2 hook. What we're going to do is choose the size that silvers bite. In this case, it'd be a number 5 or number 6 hook. I'm going to choose a 6 because I find that we don't get a ridiculous amount of cutthroats biting. For some species, you may want to choose one size bigger to eliminate hordes of smaller fish if that becomes an issue. Next, we'll look at the diamond location map. We're headed to location number 4 because a few of my channel members, namely Cowboy Kermit and Jivers, directed me here, and it's an incredible spot. Rather conveniently, you can also get diamond brook trout and more rarely diamond rainbow trout here, so I definitely recommend checking it out. So, with the setup out of the way, here's the concept. What we're trying to do is catch a lot of cutthroat trout, and even beyond that, since we have opportunities at other diamonds here, brook trout and rainbow trout catches are good too. Now, if you're really after one particular species diamond, you want to compare the baits that all the fish in the area you're fishing will hit, and if possible, use a bait or lure that only your target species bites. Since here we're actually targeting 3 species, just with one primary species, we'll be using a size 6 spinner, as all 3 species will hit that. The premise is actually very simple. We want to catch a lot of fish, as opposed to using a large hook that only will have diamonds hitting it, because there's not always going to be a diamond in the area, and we'll get into that. I'd say there are a few species that are exceptions to this, but generally I find this is the most consistent way of landing diamonds. As we catch fish, new fish will spawn in their place. Along with that, I don't know for sure how fish spawning and respawns work, but I believe that every so often you'll get older fish despawning and new ones spawning in. So we're in a place that is known to produce diamonds. We're using a lure that's going to attract a lot of fish and therefore will have new fish spawning consistently. Is there anything else to it? Yes and no. Water temperature seems to play a part, and you'll hear different opinions on this, but in my subjective opinion, at the very least, there are conditions that produce larger fish more frequently. So what are those conditions? Well, it's species dependent. So how do we know when to fish then? Generally what I do is I search through the community and I look at screenshots of diamonds. Those screenshots will show the water temperature at the time of the catch, so check this out. I have a whole bunch of screenshots of diamond cutthroats here. The water temperature seems to routinely be between 45 and 48 degrees when I'm catching these diamonds. So what I found is that in this location, water temps tend to hit that mark in the afternoon and kind of retain into the evening. So we'll be looking to join daytime or evening servers on this quest. You could of course find a morning server and basically fish all day if you have the time, especially if you don't know what time of day produces the temperatures you're after. I have done this with a few species and had success, but for this quest, we're fishing in that afternoon and evening window. So, that's the entirety of the setup. Let's see if we can land ourselves a diamond. And so, with this particular spot, what tends to work well is getting to a position where you can pretty much run the lure right along the edge of the bank. So, what I do is line myself up with the end of the lily pads, and that should work pretty good. So, I want you to take note of what you can see from the surface right now, and that is pretty much nothing, and we'll come back to that. So, we're going to get this thrown out there, run it right along the bank like I mentioned, and hopefully sooner rather than later we'll start to pull some trout out of there. pretty nice rainbow just surfaced right next to us. And you probably noticed I entered a daytime server. Thought being, as we have our first one on the end of the line here, it should put us in here right around noon, and that's going to put us in the window that we're looking for cutthroats. And this is going to be the idea. We're going to be pulling out a lot of subpar fish, but eventually a big one should show up. Looks like our first one's going to be probably a smaller rainbow than what came up right by the boat, and it'll in all likelihood be the first of many. If we put in the time though, we're going to go from bronzes to some much nicer looking metals. So we've got, as that rainbow comes over there again, our first cutty on the end of the line. And I would say with this kind of approach, you're probably not going to get a hit every single cast. 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5, something like that is kind of what you're looking for. If you're getting a bite every cast, especially if they're smaller fish, you probably want to go up a hook size, because you're probably getting a lot of small fish to bite, and that may be preventing those bigger ones from biting, because you've already got that small one on the end of the line. Ooh, there you go. It doesn't take much when you see them to know that you've got a big cutthroat on the line. Now, we've been bringing this by there time after time after time, and we haven't even seen them. All of a sudden, we see what looks like a shark come up out of there, and that's why I chose this spot. When you see a fish of that size show up, it's really clear what has just happened. As we've caught a bunch of fish in the last, say, 30 seconds or so, this guy spawned. 12.73 pound diamond cutthroat. You see that 48 degrees once again. And this is the reason that we're going to try to catch a bunch of fish as opposed to just using, say, the size 2 spinner and only targeting the diamonds. We may have eventually gotten that guy, but it could very well be the case that as we've caught the last 5, 10, 15 fish, whatever it's been, he spawned in as a result of having room for more respawns and maybe the conditions being just right as well. And we see another one, I think that may be a diamond too, pop up right in front of us. It looks to be right in that size range, around 11 pounds is diamond. Looks like decent tension, and here's the thing. Diamond cutthroats in this location, I wouldn't say are exactly rare. You gotta put the time in, and, you know, catching a couple of fish along the way, it does seem to help. But I think we may have number 2 in just a couple of casts here. Is this guy gonna make it? I think so. Diamond indeed, 12.22 pounds. And you can see why this kind of thing works, especially when you're in a location where the conditions are good, diamonds tend to spawn. If we're constantly catching fish, and there's that need to replenish the area with more fish respawns, eventually one's going to be good. And we're right back to catching much smaller fish, so you can see this type of thing can work. And if we keep on catching more, we may see another diamond spawn in. Obviously, to some degree, it is based on RNG, but when we pull this in, I'm going to take a look at the time real quick on the map. And I want you to keep in mind, like, this method can work for a bunch of different species. One of the reasons that I chose a cutthroat is because they're so obvious. The diamonds are almost comically large. You can see them show up from the surface. And that kind of helps to illustrate the point of them spawning as we catch more fish. So it's about 1400, that afternoon, evening window that I mentioned. And seeing them from the surface obviously isn't that important. Whether you're after cutthroats, if you want to catch a diamond, come to this spot, obviously it's really good, or any other species. You can take this basic approach. Whether or not you're actually seeing the fish is really irrelevant. The reason I wanted to do it here is so you can see that aspect of the spawning. We're bringing this by time after time, and we're not seeing those big ones, then suddenly, they're there. You know something had to cause it. I can see another really big cutthroat just spawned over there along the bank. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but we'll wait until he maybe surfaces, and he had to have just shown up again. Just kind of below that rock is where I saw him. See if he'll maybe go to the surface. Now we can't, there he is right there. We can bring the lure along and get him to come up, but I wanted you guys to see him surfacing. And again, diamond cutthroats aren't that rare. If you want to go and catch diamonds, this spot, if you want to get some diamond tokens, is fantastic. The point is, and I think we hooked the wrong fish by the way, the point is, it's a really good demonstration for why this method is really effective. We can catch a bunch of small fish like this brook trout that probably stole it right out from underneath that diamond cutty, and eventually the big ones will show up. So where the heck is he now? I'm just going to throw this straight out here, and I do believe eventually with time fish will despawn, so we don't really want to mess around here too long. There he is. That should get the point across that we can catch diamonds with this method really, really effectively. And again, like, they're just so absurdly huge. You don't typically see, with a lot of bodies of water and a lot of types of fish, you don't see them from the surface all the time. But if we just had continued casting along there, eventually he would have hit. So let's get him in here to the boat. Might be our best one of the day. Can't quite tell, but that is a really nice looking fish. Pretty slow secure catch, which is typically a good sign. Yeah, that is a 14.33 pounder, just shy of our PB. Clearly, this method works. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because if I took what is maybe my normal method in real life of just fishing any body of water, probably wouldn't be in the boat. I might be over here along the bank. What I'd typically be doing is going along here, probably 2-3 casts in this area, give it like 5 minutes, and then I'm going to move a little bit further down and do the exact same thing 20-30 feet down the bank. That can work, and actually I came here earlier to try to record this, and on my very first cast, caught a diamond cutthroat. With this particular, that's a big cutthroat. Hang on. This is not, how am I dang it, man. So obviously, if you get lucky and there's a diamond in the area you're fishing already, you can absolutely just move along, cover ground, and eventually catch a good one. But what seems to be the most consistent is hitting one spot for a longer period of time. But as I've been saying throughout, diamond cutthroats, not that rare. Let's take this same strategy after a couple of diamonds I've never caught, northern pike and tiger muskie, and see if we can make it work there. Now this video is already getting kinda long, so here's the rundown. Both northern pike and tiger muskie will have silvers hit a size 3 hook. So we're geared up with the size 3 spoon and headed to location number 5 on the tiger muskie diamond map. I expected this to potentially take a while, so I settled in, started up a YouTube video, and threw out my first cast. We landed silver after silver. Finally, after 30 minutes, a gold pike. A solid fish, but we've seen this work far better. Another 30 minutes went by. Then suddenly we had a hit that produced a little more attention than before. This one required pumping to bring it in with any efficiency. As we laid eyes on him, it was clear he was far and away the biggest catch of the day. No way. Our first ever diamond tiger muskie, 54 minutes. That's all that took. One gold in the process, and it was a northern pike, 20.15 pounds, and a 3.35 foot awesome looking fish. I thought we'd be here for like 2-3 hours maybe. That worked really, really well. Now I know I'm not the first person to come up with that strategy, but a lot of you guys ask what is the best way to catch diamonds in this game, and that certainly seems to be the way. It took me a very long time to just develop the patience needed to hit one spot for, in the case of the diamond tiger muskie even, an hour straight. But when you know you're in a location that can spawn diamonds, if you keep it up, eventually one's going to show up as you keep on getting those fish respawns. Now, one thing I did want to talk about is just some exceptions to that strategy. What I would not do is put on your silver size hook for something, for instance, like lake trout. I think we've got one hitting here. And the problem with lake trout, and anything really large like them, common carp, grass carp, mere carp, they're such large fish. They take so long to bring in. Even, a decent gold is going to be a really long fight. It's just inefficient. So I'll take the time to get this in. We'll see what it is and how long it actually takes to land. And my guess is it'll be way longer, even than our diamond tiger muskie, which of course would be a long fight compared to what we typically were bringing in. So I tried my best to land him as quickly as possible, just in the interest of comparing the time. This is a silver lake trout, 17.5 pounds. I mean, a minute and 48 seconds, and you gotta figure when you're catching even like a small gold, upwards of 2 minutes with decent equipment, that's just not efficient. So for the really big fish species, I'd be using a gold size hook, and that way at least you're going to be catching golds or that diamond every time you get a bite. Also considering that you're routinely fishing at the bottom for species like that, and you just don't know what's down there. You might be having those silvers take the bait right out from underneath your diamond time after time, and you'd never know it because they're so far below the surface. So for my money, those types of species, that's the exception. Use a gold size hook or diamond size hook if you really don't feel like bringing them in. Everything else though, that silver strategy works really, really well, and I'm looking forward to using that strategy to hopefully catch a lot more diamonds. So on that note, that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.